So today I'm going to tell you about the fairy tale Thumbelina, and this is a fairy tale that is super near and dear to my heart. I used to watch the movie all the time when I was a kid. I love the story and it's so much fun. And we have Klaus over here, who is our handy dandy listener. And so once upon a time, there was a woman who wanted a tiny child. And so she sought out an old woman, an old magical fairy woman, for help. And she asked this old magical fairy woman, I really want a child so bad, can you please help me? And the magical fairy woman gave her a magical seed. So much magic. And so the woman went home and planted that seed in the ground and nourished it and helped it grow. And soon it bloomed and blossomed. So once it bloomed and blossomed, she gave it the petals a kiss, and all of a sudden, poof, the blossom opened up and there was a tiny child sitting in the center. And this tiny child she looked at and said, wow, you are no bigger than my thumb. I'm going to call you Thumbelina. And am I boring you? I'm gonna call you Thumbelina. So Thumbelina lived her life at her house, where in her kitchen she would play in her makeshift pond, which was a bowl with flowers, and her little boat was a tulip petal with some white horse hairs as oars. And she would boat around in her little pond all day, and at night she would go to sleep in a polished walnut shell. But one night, while Thumbelina was sleeping, an evil toad broke in. Now this toad looked at Thumbelina and said, you would make an excellent wife for my son. So she snatched Thumbelina up while she was sleeping and took her away. And she knew that if she let her down on the ground in the forest, that Thumbelina would just take off going and run away. So she brought her to a stream and put her in the center of the stream on a lily pad, so they knew that she could never get away. The next morning, Thumbelina woke up and she was like, oh my gosh, where am I? This is crazy. And started crying because she realized she's been held prisoner by toads. And she started crying and wailing, and the fish below in the stream heard her cries, and they said, oh my goodness, this is terrible. Let's save her. And what they did was they chewed through the bottom of the lily pad to break it free so Thumbelina could escape the toads. So as the lily pad broke free, she went down the stream, and a butterfly flew by and said, Thumbelina, I want to help you get away faster. So they tethered the butterfly to the lily pad and went downstream. So as she was going downstream, a June bug flew by and said, oh my gosh, that is the prettiest girl I've ever seen in the world. I need her, and snatched her up from the lily pad and took off. And Thumbelina was going crazy because she was so scared for the butterfly that it wouldn't be able to break off from the lily pad. But the June bug did not care about that. He was saying, I want to show you to my friends. You are the beautiful girl, the most prettiest in the world. And he took her over to his friends high in the trees. And his other two June bug friends looked at Thumbelina and said, that is the ugliest girl I've ever seen in the world. And the June bug holding her looked at her and said, I guess you're right, and dropped her. So Thumbelina fell all the way down to the forest floor. And she realized that she was kind of lost, so she was like, I'm gonna make the best of it. And it was summertime, so she lived throughout the whole summer off of dew from the leaves and, eating whatever she could find. But soon summer turned into fall and then winter. And when it became winter, snow started falling and it got very cold. So Thumbelina knew she had to find some shelter. And on her way through the forest looking for shelter, she found a field mouse who had a little house and said, "Field mouse, can I please stay with you?" And the field mouse turned around and said, "Sure, you can stay with me as long as you clean my house every day and tell me a story every day." And Thumbelina thought about it and was like, "Sounds good, let's do it." So the field mouse and Thumbelina started living together. And during the times that Thumbelina would tell her a story, the next door neighbor, who was a mole, would come over and listen to it. And the mole and Thumbelina didn't really have too much in common. Thumbelina loved the sunshine and thumbelina, and the mole was blind and liked to be underground and darkness. But they found a mutual ground when Thumbelina would sing. He loved her voice, and soon he began to fall in love with her. But Thumbelina did not feel the same. So one day, the mole, the field mouse, and Thumbelina were walking through the mole's underground tunnels, and they came across a bird. And they were looking at the bird, and it was laying there, not moving at all. So the mole stuck his nose up through the dirt to get some sunlight in so they could assess the situation. And the bird, they realized, was dead. And the mole said, "It must be such a tragedy to have been born a bird," and closed up the hole and kept walking. But Thumbelina felt so sad. She laid a kiss on its eyes and walked away. But the next day, she couldn't stop thinking about this bird. So she came back down, and with some hay, she wove it a little blanket and put it on him and laid her head on his chest and heard bum bum. And she jumped back because she was like, "Oh my gosh, this bird is still alive. This is amazing." And so during the rest of the winter, Thumbelina nursed the bird back to health. And at the end of the winter, the bird was ready to fly off and turned to Thumbelina and said, "Do you want to come with me? I'm going to travel to all these different countries. I'm going to see the world. Do you want to come?" And she was too scared. She was kind of content where she was. So she was like, "You know what? No, go see them, have fun." And so he took off. When Thumbelina got back into her house, the field mouse turned around and said, "The mole has asked for your hand in marriage." And Thumbelina was like, "Oh." And the field mouse says, "And I agreed to it. So you will be married once you complete your wedding dress. So start making it." So Thumbelina started to make her wedding dress while she was very upset, but she knew there was nothing else for her. And the day she completed her wedding dress, she told the field mouse, and the field mouse said, "Well, you will be married in 4 weeks' time." On the day of her wedding, she got all dressed up in her wedding dress and took one last time outside because she knew with being married to the mole, he didn't like the sunshine, he didn't like going outside. So she knew she was going to be underground for a very, very long time. So she went outside just to get some sunshine and breathe in those fresh flowers. And while she was outside, she heard some chirping, and she looked up, and there was the bird again. And he said, "Thumbelina, will you come with me this time? I've seen beautiful countries, warmer areas. I'm going somewhere where there's lots of sunshine and flowers." And she was like, "You know what? This kind of sounds like a good idea this time." So she jumped on the bird's back, tied her veil to him, and they took off into the sunset. As they were flying around, he was like, "I'm going to bring you to the best place." And soon they came down, and she saw a field of flowers. And in each of these flowers were tiny people just like her. And the only difference of them were they had these beautiful wings. So they were fairies instead of just tiny people. And so when the bird brought her down, she saw there was one special person. He had a crown on. He was the king of the flower people. And he looked at Thumbelina and instantly fell in love and took his crown off and gave it to her and said, "Will you be my wife and be the queen of the flower people?" And she said, "Yes, this is amazing. I'm already in my wedding dress. Let's do it." So they got married, and all the tiny flower people were so happy for them. And one of the wedding gifts that Thumbelina received was a pair of her own beautiful wings. And the two of them lived happily ever after. The end. I hope you all enjoyed Thumbelina as much as I did. If you've never seen the movie, definitely check it out. And also make sure you check out the books by Hans Christian Andersen. Have a great time.